Hey, Andrew Chalman here with ADSR Sounds. In this tutorial, I'll be working with the Maschine Micro and the Complete Control keyboard to show you my process of adding instruments to my Maschine projects. So I'll be working on the keys, I'll be playing some phrases and some chords, and just showing you how I add those different instruments to my Maschine project. So before we get into it too much, I just want to say that because this is a flexible, sort of a theoretical tutorial, I can't show you the single way to do things. It's not like I'm working on the hardware to show you what buttons you need to press to do a certain feature. This is going to be more of a guideline tutorial, and hopefully by showing you my process, you'll see some things that you find helpful and you can incorporate those into your own workflow. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into this tutorial and take a look at the Maschine project. So this started with a drum group here. I just had some nice drums that I liked the sound of, and I created a drum loop that sounded like this. So after I created this drum loop, I wanted to go ahead and add some instruments to it. So the first thing I do is obviously select my first instrument, and this is oftentimes going to be the sort of foundational instrument, as I call it, the one that lays the foundation for all of the other instruments to come after it. So I listened to this drum loop and I got that nice groove feeling to it, so I figured an electronic piano would sound good with those drums. So I went ahead and loaded up an EP, and it sounded like this. That is the sound that I selected. So I have my instrument selected, and now I want to go ahead and actually figure out the notes that I want to play with this drum loop. So when we're working with these foundational instruments, as I call them, I tend to not do anything too complicated. I either play just some block chords or some arpeggiated chords. So I had two ideas that I chose from for this project. The first one was a nice sort of arpeggio chord thing in G, sort of stepping down. Sounded like this. I'll just show you how it sounded. So that was one idea I had, and then I also went ahead, kept playing around with it in case I found anything better, and I found some chords that I like the sound of, a little bit more jazzy sounding to them. Maybe that would go better with the drums, so that sounded like this. So between those different ideas, I settled on the second option, those chords, as the one that I wanted to use for the foundation of this project. So I had those chords, and I went ahead and recorded in a pattern with those notes that I decided on. And I'm not going to actually go through the recording process in this tutorial just because it's super tedious. I'll take several different takes, find the one that I like, and then even if I have a good take, I'll probably go into the software and edit the notes a little bit. But anyways, I recorded those chords into a Maschine pattern, and it sounded like this. I just played it for you, so it's just those chords, and they're in a pattern now, so I can go ahead and work on the next instrument. So after I had recorded the electronic piano, I wanted to go ahead and add a bass line to the project. And now before I actually loaded up a bass sound and started playing around with it, I took a look at the chords that I had just entered into my pattern. So I took these chords and sort of broke them down into the most basic form. So 3 times within the pattern I play these chords. I start here and I go down to this F chord. So that happens 3 times. There's some different filler notes depending on where I am in the pattern, but that happens 3 times. Now on the 4th time at the end of the pattern, those same chords play, but then I go up to this A flat chord. So that sort of marked the 4 different sections within my pattern. I have those main chords happen 3 times, then the 4th time it goes to a little bit of a different section just to add that A flat chord. So I wanted to keep these sections in mind as I added additional instruments on top of my electronic piano. So you'll hear me talking about those a little bit as we move on through the rest of the instruments. So like I said, I wanted to go ahead and add a bass, so I moved on to a bass sound from Contact, a nice electric bass. And I wanted to go ahead and match those sections with the bass. Now when you're adding a bass line, I personally believe it's a good idea to always play the main notes of the chords on the first beat. That's going to make sure it doesn't sound too weird. Generally it's going to sound something like this. that's going to be the bass line in its most simple form, just playing those main notes. Now between those notes, there's a lot of space, so I took that space up with some nice filler notes. So that sounded something like this. And you can also hear that I added some nice rhythm to the bass, some nice syncopation. So that covered the 3 sections, just going in between the G and the F and adding those different filler notes depending on where I was in the pattern. Now on the 4th section, I wanted to do something a little bit different, so instead of doing the rhythmic bass, I just went ahead and did some long sustained notes. Sounded like this. Well, you'll hear it when I play the bass line in its entirety. So I recorded that in, took some couple different takes, make sure I got it as I wanted it, and it sounded like this. So we can hear as the track plays, the bass matches the chords and those sort of sections match up. And that's something that I try to keep in mind when I'm adding these instruments, a sort of overall cohesiveness of the project.